Hey guys, and welcome back to year number 3 of our Miami Marlins Rebuild in MLB The Show 18. And we're starting off at opening day 2020. We've already gone through all of the offseason, so I am going to be going over that and giving you guys a brief recap on kind of what went down there. Before we do jump into that, though, two things that I want to point out. One, we're still rated 29th overall in team rankings, so there was no movement there. Though, like we did at the last trade deadline, from here on out, I do want to start to target more major league players to bring in onto this team, and not so much just target prospects that could potentially help us a few years down the road. So, hopefully with that, we're going to start to turn this team around, start getting that ranking up a little bit more, and then once we are at a certain point, and potentially in playoff contention or think that we're going to be there very soon, we can start to go out and bring in some of those impact players or bigger free agent names. Another thing that I wanted to go over was the budget. We've gone up about a little bit over $20 million in our player salaries as opposed to last opening day. And that has to do with a couple of the free agent signings that we made this offseason that you can see at the top of this list. But it also has to do with the players that we already have on the roster, who are gaining MLB experience, which is great. And, some of them are actually playing pretty well. So for both of those reasons, the salaries have gone up a little bit more. Hopefully they can continue to improve. It'd be great to have them get better, obviously, and help us get better as a whole and really start to trend up, like I mentioned before. But the downside to that is, the salary is going to be going up. We're not a huge market team, so, that could be a little bit tricky depending on how quickly we come into contention. So I do really want to start to bring in some major league players, some bigger names soon, so that we don't, push ourselves between a rock and a hard spot and have to move on from some of the players that we've watched get better and expected to be there for us to get our team going a little bit more. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up the budget and the overall rating and kind of everything that came into play with that. But now into the roster. We made a few moves in obviously signing some players, a couple guys we didn't bring back as well. One guy to note is Andres Blanco, who actually retired, so we weren't going to bring him back, but I figured I'd mention that just to let you guys know. So he wasn't really an issue moving into the offseason. A couple of the other guys that we didn't bring back were Javi Guerra, a reliever, just because the bullpen's pretty crowded right now, some solid arms. So I really didn't think he had the opportunity to play at the major league level, and it was just better to let him walk. Another guy that we didn't bring back was Drew Storen, who we really didn't want to pay. When he was in the major league for a brief time with us last year, he really didn't perform very well at all. So I really didn't think bringing him back was a good move. And another guy that we didn't bring back was Brock Holt, the right fielder who we got from the Red Sox last year. He was trending down a decent amount, so it was better to let him walk as well. Two younger players that we didn't bring back that we actually picked up last offseason, third baseman by the name of Sanchez and a shortstop by the name of Roberts. They were, I think, C and D potential respectively, and they started to trend down. They really weren't doing that well. Only Sanchez really played in the major leagues, and it was very, very brief. So I thought it better that we just move on from them, open up a few spots on the roster to potentially make a few moves that'll help better the team. And that brings us to the moves that we did make, which were 3 guys, all veteran players. The first of which was Austin Jackson. I just didn't feel like we had a good starting third outfielder. A lot of them were either just platoon or bench pieces, or just not performing well enough to be in that outfield spot. So we brought in Jackson to kind of hold down that position for at least this year. He's a solid player, solid contact, good clutch, good fielder. So hopefully he can, like I said, hold down that position at least for this year and make the team a little bit better. The second guy that we picked up was Ryan Zimmerman, who I really just wasn't comfortable with the guys at first base on the 40-man roster or the major league level. So, bringing him in really helps solidify that position a little bit more, at least for this season. Again, he is 35, so it's kind of like depending on how he declines, or if he declines, or how quickly he declines, as to whether or not he'll be here past this season. Though, at the moment I'm expecting him not to be, but he really brings a nice presence to the lineup, and makes it a little bit tougher for opposing pitchers to handle. And the third guy that we picked up was Logan Forsythe, who is again a veteran presence. He he's a solid hitter, solid defense. Not a great player, but he's definitely a little bit above average, so he's a solid guy to have there in the lineup. I wasn't comfortable with Diaz playing second, as he did struggle last year, so I did want him to start in the minors a little bit. And Rivera was really the only other option, who, again, I didn't feel comfortable having in his starting position at the major league level. So those were the three guys that we brought in. Those were really the main signings that we made. And to start the season, I'll just go over the 25-man roster. We got Urania, who is our ace. Garcia, Johnson, and Bridwell are all back in the rotation for now. Pablo Lopez has that fifth spot. The only reason I didn't bring up Alcantara was because he's our biggest prospect, and I just wanted to let him develop as much as possible in the minor leagues. I know he's kind of unhappy about that, but I do plan to bring him up a little bit later in the season. Smith, of course, didn't really perform well last year, as you guys know, so I'm not going to have him back. In the bullpen, we got Jimenez, Steckenrider, Alvarado, Whitgren, Barnes, and Liberatore. A very solid bullpen with the potential to be a big strength for us moving forward through this year. Whether or not they perform, we will see, but I'm very happy with what that looks like right now on paper. And our closer, of course, is AJ Minter, who we're hoping can take another step forward this year, maybe fix up his stats just a little bit better, be a little more consistent. As for the offensive side of things and the position players, we got Holiday and Smith platooning and catcher. Zimmerman, of course, we know is playing first base. Forsythe second. We got Robertson starting at third, Riddle starting at short, and Rojas and Cuthbert are going to be on the bench. In the outfield, of course, we have Jackson, Brinson, and Anderson in the starting positions. We got Arcia and Sierra as the bench pieces, mostly because Sierra is he's still developing. He just hasn't really performed when he has played, so I don't feel comfortable putting him in the starting three. Arcia is more of a platoon player. We got Galloway, who's always able to come up and help out a little bit if we need him. He's in the minors, and the same goes for Bostick. Mesa and Kirilloff are two guys that are very soon going to be hitting that major league level. So, for right now, they're still developing, but hopefully within at least later this year, if not by next season opening day, they should be on the major league level. For the most part, those that really does it. We may make a trade or two before the season starts, depending on what we can find. I'm not going to force it just to make a trade, but I'm still kind of looking over and seeing what areas we might need to address, if any. But again, I'm not going to force anything. Hopefully we can find one or two just to make things a little bit more interesting. But if I find something, I'll obviously let you guys know. Other than that, we'll pick up at the draft. And along with the draft, of course, we'll kind of go over very briefly just how the team is doing up to that point. Any notes that we need to make, we'll make them. But that kind of does it for this part. We've gone over the roster, and again, if there's any trades being made, I'll meet you guys at that screen. Otherwise, I will see you at the draft to start the 2020 season for the Miami Marlins. Alright, so we did find one trade actually that we're going to be making before the season starts, and we're going to be acquiring starting pitcher Andrew Heaney from the Angels. He's 28, B potential 87 overall. He's a nice solid starter. Definitely a top of the rotation type of guy. And in return, we're going to be sending over Brian Johnson, starting pitcher, who we actually acquired from the Red Sox last year, as well as Dylan Peters, who is a little bit older, but he's still a prospect for us in the minors. I think he actually did before we even started the rebuild, he pitched in 2017. Not too great, but he has been down there. He's a little bit older. We do want to move on from him. And he also is getting paid a little bit more than I'd like to pay someone who's just hanging out in the minor leagues. And we're also going to be trading Peter O'Brien just to help the deal go through. And we did want to trade, actually, I didn't mention it, but we did want to trade, someone in here, so either O'Brien or Cooper. So we're going to be moving on from these three guys, O'Brien, Peters, and Johnson. Heaney is making $5 million a year for the next 2 years, so he is a little bit more expensive than what we have right now. He is going to make our salary go up a little bit, but I do think it's worth it. Hopefully he performs. That's going to be the big if. You know, Johnson is a lefty, so is Heaney, so he kind of takes over that second lefty spot, though we are going to move everyone else down one spot so that Heaney can move into the ace position. But yeah, I really do think that this is going to help the rotation a little bit, help make it a little bit more top heavy, because we do have a couple of prospects coming up that could take some of those, you know, that 4th or 5th spot. So hopefully this works out. It is going to push the salary up a little bit more, like I mentioned, but I do think that's okay. We do have some space to work with. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be it. I don't think we're going to be making a second trade. I do want to see how everybody kind of performs as the year goes on a little bit. So with that being said, I'll meet you guys back at the draft in just a few moments. Alright, so here are the results to the 2020 draft for us, and we drafted 7 players, 2 of which we're not going to be offering contracts to, in reliever Brad Rogers and center fielder Bobby Deutscher, if I said that right. They're both deep potential players. One's 22, one's 18. I feel like we have enough players in the organization to fill out all the spots in the roster and have enough depth. So I really don't think it's necessary to draft these guys just for that reason, because that's really the only reason I would draft them, being deep potential, organizational depth. But you know, we're not going to do that. So moving on from them, we have 2 C potential guys. One shortstop, Johan Silva, who's 22. He's a 52 overall right now. He brings a lot of speed. He has good durability. But both offensively and defensively, he needs a lot of time to develop. So, you know, probably not going to be much of not an impact player, but much of a of a guy that's really going to have any use for us in this organization. He's probably going to hang out in the minor leagues for the rest of the rebuild, to be honest. But you know, just in case he starts to develop, you know, he could be useful in a trade, obviously. So, you know, we're going to sign him regardless. Another C potential guy is Chet Boshel, who's a shortstop. He's 19. He's a 65 overall already, so he doesn't need as much time to develop. He's already a solid defensive player. He brings a lot of speed to the table. He can steal bases. He's got good durability, a little bit of power there too, but he definitely needs to develop on the offensive side of things. So again, he could be useful in a trade. He may actually, depending on how quickly he develops, turn into a bench piece for us. So we'll just obviously have to just wait and see how things turn out there. As for the other guys, we got 2 B potential guys. One second baseman, Jose Aquino, who's 20. He's a 55 overall. Someone who all the way around needs to develop, needs a couple years to develop. Again, probably someone, if anything, we'd use in a trade. The other B potential was Garrett Roy. He's a center fielder who's 18. You know, he's only a 53, but even though the durability is very low, the injuries are off at this point. I have figured out how to do that. You know, really his only strength right now is his speed, and, you know, the stealing. But, you know, if he's able to develop, you know, and he's got a lot of time to do so since he's only 18, he could become a solid player. Whether that'll be for us, I doubt it. But, you know, he could come in handy in a trade. And then the last guy that we pick that we're going to offer a contract to is our number 1 overall pick, James Huff. He's a starting pitcher. He's 20 years old, A potential. He's a 64 overall already. He's a lefty. So, you know, he looks good. He looks like he's going to turn into a good player. You know, might need a few years to do so, but the 2 things that I'm really worried about are those 2 areas that are very low in clutch and hits per 9, because I feel like even if he gets to the major leagues and develops, if those 2 areas aren't developed, especially the clutch, I don't feel like he's going to have a lot of success. So he is someone who probably holds a lot of trade value, especially within the next year or two as he starts to develop, being an A potential. So, he may actually be someone that we look to trade because, of course, we do have a lot of starting pitching depth and a lot of prospects in that area of the roster. So, again, he may be someone that we look to trade. So we got a couple of solid players out of this in Aquino, Roy, Huff, two potentially decent players in Boschel and Silva. But, the majority of them, if anything, are going to get traded. Probably the majority of them are not going to, be of much help at the Major League roster for us in this rebuild, as we are already in year 3. So yeah, but not too bad of a draft. Definitely better than last year. I'm pretty happy with it when it's all said and done. So that's going to be the 2020 draft. And before we move on, I do want to quickly update you guys on how we're doing as a team. We're 29-32 in the beginning of June, so we're doing a lot better. Even though we're still not at 500, we're doing a lot better than the past 2 years. A little bit surprising, actually, which is actually really nice to see. I do think we're only 28th overall, so we did go up one spot in the team rankings. But a couple guys to mention, we did call up Alcantara, who has only made one start so far, and we sent down Pablo Lopez, who had a 5.5 ERA, just a little high. So with Alcantara doing well in the minors that he was, we kind of flip-flopped them. Another move that we made was we called up Tyrone Guerrero, who's actually the top-rated reliever in the organization right now. He was doing really well in AAA. Whitgren was really struggling with an 8.74 ERA. He is trending down. A couple of the relievers are actually trending down. So Steckenrider, I don't know if it's going to continue. The same with Barnes. They're both trending down a bit. Though Whitgren was a lot more. Liberatore's still trending up, so that's good because he is the oldest guy in this group. So yeah, we may look to move Whitgren and potentially a Steckenrider or Barnes. I was actually going to look to move Liberatore, but since he's trending upward, unless that changes, we may look to move one of these two guys instead. Minter is actually doing really well, 21 saves. Really low ERA, as you can tell, and a whip. I think he's only given up 10 hits. Yeah, 1 run, no blown saves, so he's having a very, very good year. Really good year. Definitely turned things around. Definitely pitching to what we think he can be. Obviously, I don't expect anyone to pitch to that low of an ERA all year long or all the time, but it's really nice to see him completely turn things around. Hopefully, he can keep it on this side of the spectrum here and really perform well for us in that closing role. In the position players, I should say, I don't think we made any moves. We actually did send down Sierra, who again was struggling. I may look to trade him because he's just not really performing for us. But we sent him down to the minors because he was struggling so badly, and we called up Galloway, who's a pretty solid bench bat. Kirilloff is performing very nicely. He's trending up a lot, as well as Sheldon Noose, who's doing very well in AAA so far. So that's very nice to see the two of them. Those are kind of our two main guys. Mesa's struggling a bit, but I don't know. We'll kind of have to see moving forward with him and some of the other guys. But overall, having a very nice season. Especially from what it was the past 2 years. So things are looking definitely very promising for us. We're definitely going to be looking to make a few trades at the deadline. A couple guys that we want to move on from, especially from what we just saw. But I'll meet you guys at the deadline, and we'll kind of go over any moves that we're going to be making there. So doing good so far this year, and I'll see you guys at the end of July. So the first trade that we're going to be looking to make at the deadline is going to be for a starting pitcher from the San Diego Padres in Dinelson Lamet, who's 27 B potential, 87 overall. Just a really solid starter who can really take up a position at the top of the rotation for us. And in return, we're going to be sending over Jose Urena. They're kind of going to be We're going to be flip-flopping him for Lamet in a way, just in terms of that rotation spot. But of course, Lamet is a little bit younger, a little bit higher potential, still trending upwards. He's obviously a little bit higher in his overall rating as well. So, we're going to be getting back the better starting pitcher of the two, obviously, and hopefully one that can last a little bit longer down the road into the future. We're also going to be sending over, as the next two pieces in this deal, Chris Bostick, who's just kind of a depth piece for us. He does bring a decent amount of power to the table, and he's played for us the past 2 years and shown that power. But just kind of hard to get him a spot in the Major League roster with all these other prospects coming up that are going to demand playing time. And then the third piece is going to be Magneuris, I'm not really sure how to say his name, Sierra, who I mentioned we are looking to trade just because when he has played for us, he hasn't really performed. And a big part of what I'm looking for with him is contact and that average, because he really doesn't have a lot of power. So this might be better for us to open up a few spots on the roster for Mesa and Kirilov, who are going to be looking to crack the Major League squad soon. Harrison is another guy that's there who could always potentially be on the Major League roster as well. So this kind of opens up some space for us to bring up some more of those prospects that are ready to play. And it also gives Sierra an opportunity to play at the Major League level on another team that kind of might have more space to put him there. Though it does look a little bit crowded there, but he should be able to play on the Padres. So that's going to be the trade, the first trade at least. I do have a couple more in mind that are going to address some other areas that are a little bit questionable on the roster right now, including shore up a little bit of that outfield space that we just emptied with Sierra and Bostick. So stick around for just a moment, and I'll meet you guys back at another one of these trade screens to make the second trade at the deadline. So the second trade that we're going to be making is with the New York Yankees, and we're going to be receiving 2 players from their team in exchange for 3 of ours. The 2 players that we are going to be picking up are reliever Chad Green, who's 28 B potential, 83 overall, very solid bullpen arm, along with Kyle Seager, who's a third baseman who also plays first base, and that's really the reason why we're picking him up, who's 32 B potential, 82 overall. Now, the 3 players that we're going to be sending over are Chad Wallach, who's 28 B potential, 70. He's kind of a backup catcher in the minor leagues for us right now. Not sure if he's going to have a place to play necessarily on their team, but I'd rather trade him right now than some of the other prospects that we have at the catching position. The other 2 guys that we're going to be looking to move are Matt Barnes, who we received from Boston last year in a trade. He's just starting to trend down a little more than I'd like to see, and again, I was probably before the season started looking to trade Liberatore, but he's still trending upward, he's still performing well. And Steckenrider, who was trending down a little bit more earlier in the year, has kind of turned it around a little bit, and he's performing well. So I am going to be looking to trade Barnes here, and along with Ryan Zimmerman, who's a first baseman. So we're going to be losing that first base position at the Major League level. Again, I'm not really comfortable necessarily bringing up Cooper to fill in that spot. I am probably going to look to move Cooper at some point. So that's where Kyle Seager comes in, who also plays first base. So he's going to kind of fill in there for the time being, at least. So that's going to be it for the second trade, and I do have one more in mind that I want to make before we finish up with the trade deadline. So hold on for just 1 second, and I will meet you back at that screen in just a moment. So for the third and final trade to this year's deadline, we're going to be looking to make a deal with the Arizona Diamondbacks, which is essentially going to be swapping 3 players for 3 players. So the 3 players that we're going to be moving on from are relievers Nick Wittgren, second baseman Logan Forsythe, and second baseman Frank Villa. Villa we acquired via the draft. I believe it was last season, but he's just going to be in here to kind of help the deal to go through. The 2 bigger pieces that we're moving on from are Logan Forsythe, who we did acquire via free agency this past offseason. It is a bit of a salary relief for us as we are paying him $5 million this year, but he's not really. It's not like he's having a bad year, but he's not performing as well as he has the past couple of years. And we really did only bring him in to fill in for Diaz, who I'm a little unsure about, and I still am. but he has been performing nicely, and he has been developing a little bit more in the minors this year. So I do feel like it's a good time to try to bring him back up and see if he can perform at the major league level. And if he does struggle a little bit, we can always leave him in versus righties, as he is better versus righties, and have Rivera or one of the guys that we're going to be receiving in this trade step in and help out versus lefties. So that's pretty much set to go there. And then the third player that we're going to be moving on from, like I mentioned, is going to be, or maybe I didn't mention him, I can't remember, is going to be Nick Wittgren, who, as you guys know, he just hasn't been getting it done for us. He's really been playing pretty terribly the past 2 years. He did play nice that first season, but again, like I said, he just has not been getting it done. So I do believe that it's a good time to finally just move on from him. Now, the three players that we're going to be receiving in return are reliever Ruby De La Rosa, who's 31 C potential, 75 overall. He's kind of going to be a depth piece, someone that we can bring up if we need to for whatever reason, fill a spot in that bullpen. Because we do actually have a lot of solid arms in there right now. So I'm not really worried about the major league level there just at the moment. But he is, like I mentioned, someone that can be a nice depth piece for us. And the second guy, that we're going to be receiving is Jose Vinicio, who is one of those guys along with Rivera who can kind of help out Diaz if he does struggle a little bit. So he is a nice complement to Diaz, as is Rivera. So, we're pretty set, like I said, on the middle infield at the moment. And then the third player that we're going to be receiving is Yasmani Tomas, who is mostly just there to step in because we did lose Sierra and we did lose Bostick, both in a trade with the San Diego Padres just recently. So, there is some space there in the outfield for a guy on the 40-man roster. Brinson really has been struggling a lot lately, so I'm thinking I'm going to platoon him with Jackson, and Tomas will kind of be that third outfielder and play left field on an everyday basis. So that pretty much should do it for the trades this year. Hopefully they help us out, not just now, but also in the future a little bit. And hopefully they help us out. But I will see you guys at the end of the year, and we'll really go over how the team did this year, as we have been improving so far. So hopefully we can keep that going, and we'll kind of see how everything plays out at the end of the year. So I'll see you guys in just a moment. Okay guys, so we made it to the end of the season, and we finished the year going 76 and 86, which right off the bat is a lot better than the past 2 seasons. So we're definitely headed in the right direction. We are 26th overall in terms of team rankings, so we have gone up a couple spots. We were actually 21st before the rosters got sent back down to 25-man rosters. So when we still had the 40-man rosters in September at the end of the year, we actually were 21st in team rankings, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. Maybe I shouldn't be sending down some of the guys that got sent down. Maybe that has to do with it. But anyway, we've definitely done a lot better this year than we have in the past, so that's really good news. Really promising for this team moving forward. In terms of what teams won which divisions, the Phillies won in the East, the Brewers won in the Central, the Dodgers won in the West, and the wild card for the NL is going to be between the Reds and the Giants. In the AL, we have the Red Sox, the Indians, and the Astros winning their divisions, and the wild card in the AL is going to be between the Yankees and the Athletics. And another thing worth noting, after having the worst record in the majors the past 2 seasons, it's really nice to see that, we had, I think it was 3 teams that did worse than us in the NL, and about 7 teams, because we went 76 and 86, so about 7 teams that did worse than us in the AL. So again, looking really promising moving forward to the future for this team. So for the awards, we really didn't have too many guys get represented in the awards at the end of the year. Again, that was kind of to be expected. We had one guy here in Kyle Seager who was playing first base for us, but his primary position is third base, so he won the third baseman, or actually the Gold Glove at third base. So he really was our one guy to win an award on our team. So he was our lone representative. Again, not the best of years individually, at least for our team. Martinez hit 50 homers. It's pretty impressive. But you know, a little bit better on the pitching side of things for us. But again, nothing that, you know, we weren't expecting. You know, we still have some work to do. You know, overall we did a lot better this year, like I mentioned. But a lot of the players still need to develop a little bit more. And again, we don't really have these big players or these big names on our roster. But moving into the league leaders, again, we had a couple more guys here. On the offensive side of things, not a lot. We had a couple guys here make the leaderboards in doubles, and Kyle Seager and Austin Jackson at the bottom there with 34 and 36 doubles. But that was really it for the offensive side of things. Again, like I mentioned, we did a little bit better on the pitching side of on our game. So for pitching, we actually had one guy in losses, Lamet, who we traded for halfway through the year. He had 7 losses. In terms of saves, we have Minter here with 44. He actually struggled again in the second half. I'm a little bit worried about that trend that he has going on. But again, had a much better year. We'll get into that once we jump into the roster. I think the next was home runs allowed. We had Garcia only give up 18. In shutouts, we had some here, Bridwell with 1. Again, it's just 1, but he did make the leaderboards. In strikeouts, Lamet with 214. He was 8th in the league. There were a few others, if I can find them. In walks allowed, Bridwell again did pretty well there. He's a very good pitcher with, like, you know, homers and walks and all that stuff that really isn't talked about as much. But he had only allowed 40 walks, so that was very solid. His whip was really good in terms of everybody else in the league with a 1.1 whip. And that was really it. I think batting WAR, we had Seager with a 6 overall WAR for the season. But again, not a lot of oh, I didn't even notice. Kyle Seager was there in batting average, hit 290. So he actually pushed his average up a little bit, I think, from what it was when we traded for him. So very nice year by him. But again, not a lot of dominant years individually by players, or at least not dominant years all the way around. But you know, we're still looking to improve. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully we keep trending in the right direction. Now, as for the roster, I've already kind of said it several times on what the team did as a whole. Not too great, but we're going in the right direction. But we are going to jump in here and just look over briefly what everybody did. Lopez, he actually did not get another chance to pitch, which kind of bummed about. I thought he might get a chance in September when they called him up, but he didn't. So he finished the year with that ERA and that whip, which isn't too good, but you know, I'm not so sure moving forward what his position or what his spot on the roster is going to be. Smith did not do too great in the time that he got to play in September. You know, again, he's not going to make the roster, major league roster, most likely moving forward. Alcantara had a little bit of a rough first full year, or fuller year, but hopefully he can you know, develop nicely and keep improving as we move forward. Bridwell again with a solid season, and that really goes for the majority of the rest of these starters. Garcia had a very nice step forward this year, big step forward this year, 3.21 ERA. Heaney performed very nicely for us. You know, in almost 200 innings, he had a 3.3 ERA, and Lamet was a very solid force on the mound for us, really taking charge of that rotation and running with it. For the bullpen, we had a lot of guys here. Lorenzen, I don't think he got to pitch. No, he did not. So Lorenzen didn't get to pitch, though he is still trending upwards. We may look to use him moving forward. Hernandez, potential is trending down. That's not too good to see. You know, didn't do too good in the time that he got to play. Rodriguez, potential is trending down. He didn't get to pitch. Jimenez, I'm a little worried about. His potential and overall is trending down. He finished the year with a 5 ERA. A lot worse than last year. Kind of similar to 2018, which is what I was a little worried about when I traded for him. So depending on how he does, we're going to give him another year, I think. But depending on how he does there, we may actually look to move on from him, which is a shame because he was really performing well, and I think he was trending up. And he's only 25. So, if he's trending down, that's definitely a shame that he's not going to be able to perform the way he was performing. But again, we'll have to keep an eye on him. De La Rosa did not pitch for us this year, so he was in the minors in the second half. So his stats were exactly what we saw when we traded for him. Steckenrider had a solid year, 3.6 ERA pretty much, in just under 100 innings pitched. Liberatore, a very nice year, ERA around 3.5. His whip was nice, 81 strikeouts in 88 innings. A pretty good year by him. Guerrero came up and pitched pretty nicely. His ERA was under 3. His whip was exactly at 1. 28 innings. He actually had 6 saves. I'm not sure how that worked out. Maybe he was in the closing spot for a few games there. Not really sure actually. But he had a very nice year. Very good to see him finally doing nicely in more than just 7 innings of work. Alvarado had a very nice year. Had a 2.79 ERA. His whip was nice. 94 strikeouts. His walks are little, maybe not too high actually. I'm not really sure, to be honest. They could be a little bit lower, but I don't really think they're too bad. In 103 innings, yeah, he had a very nice year for the most part. So very good to see him perform. And Green really came in and did a really nice job in the bullpen. 2.53 ERA, 89 innings. His whip was very low. He had a very nice season. I'm really hoping that he can keep up the way he's been pitching, because he's a very good bullpen arm to have. Minter, as I mentioned, in the league leaders when we saw him, 44 saves, I think 8th in the league. His ERA was 3, but it was much lower, as you guys remember, earlier on in the season. So again, he kind of fell off a little bit in the second half, which is a little worrying, but he still finished the year pretty good. I'm just, if we ever get to the playoffs, I'm wondering how well he's going to be able to perform there. But yeah, 8 blown saves, which isn't the best, but compared to the 7, he does have a bunch more saves that he did convert. So probably a little bit better than he did in 2018, maybe not so much as in 19. But overall, he had a very nice season. Really nice to see him take that step forward. Moving on to the offensive side with position players, Smith kind of did pretty much exactly the same, just a little bit more power this year. 7 homers and 45 hits. Hit 226 on base, right around 300. So he is developing still trending up, so hopefully he continues to do that. Definitely needs to improve a little bit more on the offensive side of things. Holiday showed a little bit more power. A very nice year for him, platooning with Smith. I completely forgot the other catcher's name. But very nice by Holiday. Not sure if he's going to be back next year. I'll kind of decide that as we go, because Miles is doing pretty well, and all these guys are already in the 70s. So not sure if Holiday's going to be back, but he did perform the way we kind of expected him to this year. Cooper, he actually came up in September, had a couple games of playing time, did hit a homer, so that was cool. But again, not really someone that I'm looking to keep at first base, unless he develops very nicely in a rather quick period of time. So it's more than likely that we're going to be moving on from him at some point. Plus, Diaz is already a 69, so he's still trending up, so he might step into that role sooner than later. At second base, we have Rivera, who did not do too great when he came up, although it was very brief. Vinicio did not play for us, so his stats are only from his time on the Diamondbacks. And Diaz still showed a little bit of pop, which we like to see, though he didn't do as good as he did in his first year, but he did a lot better than last year. So it's definitely promising, and hopefully he can keep that up moving into next season. At third base, we have Cuthbert, who really performed the way, and he has over the past 2 seasons, what I expected when we traded for him. When I traded for him, I didn't think I was getting the 207 hitter. So it is nice to see him come back into form these last 2 years. Hopefully he can keep that going a little bit too, because he is a nice bench piece for us. Noose is very close to hitting the major leagues. His contact versus lefties is already at 80. He's a 74, so he might be someone that we look to call up. It's a little crowded here at third base, so we're going to have to probably make some moves there next season, or in the off season actually. But let's continue with the roster for now. Robertson kind of did as I expected. He was struggling in the beginning of the year, but he kind of turned it around a bit. Finished the year nicely. His best season so far. Nothing great, but good enough. Average player. Very nice season for him. Seager, we know, had a very nice year. 22 homers, hit 290. So that average is a bit unlike him, but it's very nice to see him put that up. So good year by Seager. Riddle, I think we're gonna have to see how he performs next year, unless we find someone who we can get at short, who's a lot better. But otherwise we're gonna have him next year, and if he doesn't do more what he did this year in 2019, we're probably gonna look to move him. I was pretty high on him after last year, but he wasn't able to keep that going, unfortunately. Rojas, another solid year on the bench. 70 hits, hit 250. Just about kind of what you expect to see from him. In the outfield, we got Tomas, who did pretty nicely for us. Hit almost 300, almost 20 homers. Nice season by him. So definitely looking forward to a full year of his bat in the lineup. Jackson, he's trending down. We may not keep him next year, but he did nice in a platoon role / everyday role for us, and not a bad season by him either. Moving on to center, Brinson picked it up in the second half a little bit more, so that was very nice to see. Pretty promising moving into next year. I know it wasn't a lot that he kind of improved with, but if he can keep developing, we're good. We're good. So a little bit back on track with the power, so a nice second half for him. And then in right field we have Galloway, who didn't really perform as well as he has in the past, but not too bad on a bench piece. We did send him down at the trade deadline, and again, we may not look to keep him on the team moving forward, because we got Kirilloff and Mesa. 73, 75 for Kirilloff. He really had a nice year in the minors, who will probably take that position on the roster. Arcia had a very nice year. Hit 299, didn't play too much, 107 at-bats, but when he did play, he was really hitting nicely and really hitting for power with 13 homers. So that was good to see. And then Anderson, our star player that we've developed, of course. He's got 162 hits, 21 homers, 82 RBIs, hit 280. On base is a little low, but a nice year by him. Definitely improving upon the fielding percentage, so that's good to see. So very nice year by him as usual. So hopefully he can keep that going moving forward, because he's that best player of ours that we've been able to call up from our minor league system. I know we didn't do it in the rebuild, but he was playing for the Marlins in their minor league system, and he's really paying off at the major league level. So overall, pretty good seasons by a lot of players. Nothing like great, nothing stand out, but definitely trending in the right direction, like I've been saying. So it's very promising moving forward. We're definitely going to look to pick up probably at least one bigger name free agent in the off season if we can. Next year with any trades, we're going to be trying to get some better players if we're able to. It's definitely that time where we're going to look to really try to turn things around with this team. So that about does it. We're going to head into the playoffs and see who wins those. We got Cincinnati beating San Francisco in the wild card for the NL. And in the AL, we have the Oakland Athletics beating the Yankees. Then in the division series, we had Milwaukee moving on to face the Dodgers, and the Boston Red Sox moving on to face the Indians. So we'll see who made it to the World Series, and we have the Cleveland Indians and the Los Angeles Dodgers meeting in the Fall Classic. So let's see who comes out on top this year. It's tied at 1 game apiece. The Indians, wow. The Indians have defeated the Dodgers. That was just really quick, that's why I said wow. But wow, so the Indians finally won. That's awesome. Oh my goodness, I think they had the longest drought. I think they do have the longest drought now that the Cubs won a few years ago. And you know, they're getting eliminated early in the playoffs every year, so it's nice to see them win, at least in a sim franchise here. So that's a nice season by the Cleveland Indians. So hopefully next year will be a year that we can maybe look to try to push for a playoff spot. If not, definitely the next season. But yeah, we're definitely moving in the right direction, as I've said, and we're going to look to make some bigger moves, hopefully, moving forward, as long as we're able to. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, until season number 4, I do believe I'm going to upload a video after this one before we continue with this postseason. Not this postseason, with this rebuild. But yeah, until the next video, I hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you guys later.